Well, I'm very pleased to have Brandon Caswell presenting on warblers that he has taken 2 years, I understand, to photograph across the state of Iowa. Brandon has been birding for around locally here for at least a decade. He has been a member of the Iowa City Bird Club. He was really part of starting up the University of Iowa Bird Club in the early 2000s, I think. And he's an excellent photographer and very knowledgeable. So please welcome Brandon Caswell.
Thank you for having me today. I'm going to present to you about sort of a couple years thing, 2 years thing in the making. But seeing all 35 species of warblers in Iowa in a calendar year, and doing that so that you are, at least getting sort of documentation photos, just doing the best you can, because right, as a photographer, you kind of just do the best you can. So yeah, sort of a memoir, and I will take you along for the ride here. What's going on here, White? Okay. So why a photo big year? Why try to see all 35 species? As a bird photographer, and someone who's out a lot, it made sense. And over those 2 years, I was working weekend overnights, so I'd have quite a bit of time during the regular week to get out and see stuff. And so the 2021 idea sort of stemmed from 2020, where I was able to see all 35. And when I say 35, I guess it's really 34. Prairies, like the additional one, but we have an area where prairies are breeding now, and they have for several years now. So I really guess I say 35. But that year I had realized, I'd gotten pretty much a photo of everything, and I'd thrown away a photo of Louisiana water thrush. So I was like, I got 34 out of the 35. So it was just kind of like a little personal thing that I wanted to do. So in 2021, I was like, yeah, I'm going to try to go for that again and try to get like at least a doc quality shot of everything. And so luckily I managed to do it. I guess it wasn't easy. But the caveat about this talk is, while a lot of it's 2021 photos, I mean, there are 2020. I basically, it's sort of a synthesis, because I wasn't able to get like, really good sort of presentation quality shots in just 2021. And so I was kind of bouncing around the idea of, do I kind of anticipate things and talk about this bigger goal that I sort of iterated into my year later. But that I decided not to, just because I wanted you to sort of see what I was seeing along the way on some of these trips to see warblers. And so that was seeing 300 species in Iowa, and it's something that I've always wanted to do, to get to that number. And in 2020, I was 2 birds away. So I was like, it's kind of like this, momentum built up, and hey, why not? 2020 was such a fabulous year for so many people, and I'm like, let's carry on this momentum, So keys to seeing all of the regular Iowa warblers. So you need to go to Southeast Iowa probably at least 1 to 3 times, I'd say. But you might not hit all your targets. Say if you planned something in like really early June or something, when all the breeders are around and have set up territories and are singing and stuff still. But just going, I love Southeast Iowa and Lee and Van Buren counties so much, and just going down there is just, I just have to do it at least once a year, it seems like. But so the next in a big sort of intersection, if this is going to work out for somebody, is getting Connecticut warbler. And so I have there, thank you, Elizabeth Aubrey. So if you don't see Connecticut warbler in the spring, then you're kind of done, because there really isn't any solid evidence that Connecticut warbler migrates back through Iowa in the fall. Sort of like some other species like blackpoll, most of them go east and then south. There's literally, I think, zero photographic evidence of Connecticut warbler. So we're waiting for that photo to arise and say, oh, maybe some do come back. Getting black-throated blue warbler is another really big check mark. And that's pretty much done at the very end of your year. It probably would usually be the last thing you're going to be looking for, but I'll elaborate more on that later. But it's possible to see black-throated blue in the spring. It's happened. I know Jamie McCoy had those ones at it's Harvest Preserve or whatever. That was a really awesome sighting. But anyway, and luck, just being at the right place in the right time. Like I said, with Elizabeth's find, I happened to be, I think I was at Squire Point, and I got a text from James Huntington, and we met and found it. So I'll have a little bonus material at the end. Some of the warblers you can see throughout Arizona and sort of New Mexico. Some get into Texas too. But here's the list. I won't go into it because I'll go into it later. So why is Eastern Iowa and such an ideal place to see all of, or attempt to see all of Iowa's regular warblers in 1 year? And so I found this really neat avian flyway map, and you notice I kind of I wrote avian flyways over where I borrowed it, but it was for, they were using it for waterfowl, but essentially you can use it for other species too. And so you have from the east to the west, the Atlantic, Mississippi, Central, and Pacific. And so we're really nicely situated, pretty close to that. The Mississippi River, of course, what defines that flyway through a lot of, if not all of Iowa. So geography is important. And so we have the Mississippi Flyway sort of in that area. And one interesting thing is a lot of the passerines, rather than maybe hug the coastlines like other species, maybe like hawks and raptors and waterfowl, a lot of them will cross the entire Gulf. So you have these great fallouts, and I won't in the most technical sense, because fallout has to do with meteorological influences of birds, like getting knocked down by a front or something like that, or rain. But you have these great fallouts of warblers, like at Dauphin Island and South Padre Island and things like that, where like in April you can see these just like, lawns littered, or areas littered with warblers. But so a lot of our warblers, jolt off the Yucatan across, and then they make their way up. Right here is an interesting spot, because that's where the Mississippi and Central Flyway actually converge. So we can, lose a lot of the warblers from the Mississippi Flyway up that way, the ones that breed up farther north in Canada. And then I have the drift list area circled because I did a little digging, and the drift list area is actually a really important area for warblers, because it's pretty vastly wooded, and streams and lots of elevation and things like that, and inaccessible, but it's a good recharge spot for warblers that come through Eastern Iowa before they do their last little jog up to like northern Wisconsin and Minnesota and Canada. So here's an elevation map of Iowa. You can see that Eastern Iowa is the least elevated, going to that Mississippi Valley. It gets more elevated as you go northwest. I just really thought the map was cool. Its only purpose is to just show you sort of the core areas that I was going to. And so I've talked about Southeast Iowa, um, Shimmick State Forest, and Lacey Keosauqua were core areas. The Eastern Iowa corridor, you know, Cedar Lake all the way down to areas through Johnson County, like Hanging Rock, Squire Point, um, Hickory Hill Park. And then I kind of had a wild card. I went to Dubuque once to chase a king rail that was at Deer Dyke. And I went the next morning. And although I struck out on the king rail, I got some cool photos of northern water thrush. It was literally sitting almost in the prints of the king rail, which was really cool. The water had gone down, so the king rail sort of moved with the water, I guess. But I also checked out on my way back um, Mines of Spain, and there's a certain hot spot that I wanted to check out there. So maybe one takeaway, if people don't know, is this canoe launch hotspot I'll talk about later. So the journey begins on Belfast Road. On 415, I went down to Shimmick State Forest, and the first bird I heard traveling down Belfast Road to the Croton unit was singing Louisiana water thrush. You know, it's sweet song. There's a stream that's on your left side, I guess, as you're going down a hill that I didn't really ever see because of vegetation. But it was hanging around that stream and allowed me to get a photo and probably an audio recording, I assume. But so number one was Louisiana water thrush. And so I'm not going to do too much ID stuff, but some of the pictures sort of beg me to do that. And so with this Louisiana water thrush, you can see the relatively just clean throat. Keep that sort of mental image because later I'll have a photo of a northern and you can see the difference. And then the streaks, there's just a lot less streaking, especially sort of on the underbelly, less dense streaking. So number two, and you'll notice that I have this one in bold up top. Any of the ones in bold were the ones that I think are really important. So pine warbler, same day, I went over and did the progression west to the Farmington unit, Coal Mine Hollow Drive. And I don't know if any of you saw, but Chuck Fuller was down there with a couple other people, and they had a really early pine warbler. And so there's a stand of red pine, and then kind of a trail through it, and then a stand of like, I think it's called like loose bark pine or something like that. But those two little stands that make that unit is kind of a traditional spot where pine warbler breed. So number two, pine warbler, and you know we can get these in Johnson County late April, and one place that I've had them is at the Coralville Res as the dam area, and some of those that stand of pines kind of in the middle there, singing in there. But another good bird that I was able to get the best photos I've ever got of in Iowa was Buick's wren. That was at the Argyle Junkyard. So that was actually before I saw the Louisiana water thrush. But for some reason last year, the Buick's wren just showed so well there. And they were already showing by now. And they would continue to show into early May. Usually it cuts off at some point. But for some reason last year, they were just really visible and singing a lot. So hopefully, you know, that continues at some point. So moving west, Lake Sugema, the lake of many names, I call it, because I've heard probably 6 or 7 pronunciations. But anyway, this year looks like it's shaping up to be another spectacular Swainson sock year in Eastern Iowa. And last year was no different. They were actively burning around Lake Sugema, and there were multiple Swainson hawks. And there was a couple people at Ailey 4 that I ran into, and I got them out there. And I can't remember her name, but she's a really good photographer from like Washington County or somewhere down there. But she had got a really good picture, and it was in the IBL. So um, as I was going into Ely Ford and taking that little hill down and going around the corner, I somehow shredded my tire. And so that ended my fun day down there. I actually had to be back to pick up my daughter, and I just had enough time to do that. And that obviously did not happen. So while I was waiting for the tow truck, um, there were Northern Parallel singing. I wasn't really in a photography mood at that point. But here's, ooh, let me move this thing, sorry. Right now, this is blocking my dates. There we go, sorry. So, here's one from 2020 at Cedar Lake. I'll just really briefly tell you, and I don't know if a lot of you know this, but Cedar Lake was leveled to the ground. That northern part where we call it the migrant trap, it is at literally a flat mound of dirt, and it is so sad. I'm still trying to process why they did that, but I could talk about it for a long time. But anyway, a lot of these shots you'll see were from that area, and it's gone forever. And they say they're going to replant native, but that's not until 2025. So good luck with that. So here's the Northern Parallel shot that I'm providing. And then I also saw a yellow-throated warbler and heard. And that's all I could really come up with was a 2020 shot. This was actually a pretty late one, I think. Got flagged, but that was at South Arm Lake McBride. And so 422, I move on to number 5. I was taking a really nice hike out at Hanging Rock. It was absolutely just gorgeous out, and I was able to get my first yellow rump warbler for the year. That was actually really distant shot, but it turned out pretty good. So Hanging Rock for number 5. Later that day, I got greater yellow legs at Hawkeye. This was down Greencast. So if you go the north extension down from Swan Lake, or no, excuse me, from Mana. If you go down not quite to the end and you park, and on the right, you go west, and you cross a little creek. There's a really nice place that no one ever goes to it. I'd like to maybe go there at least once this spring. But sort of like a diked area where you can get really good looks at waterfowl, maybe shorebirds. And then later I got a brewer's blackbird east of Amana, and I was just really happy about seeing these because they were, just lit up perfectly to see that really glossiness. So number 6, yellow warbler, was on 427. Could not get a useful photo. These things just were not coming out of these bushes. But this was at Mallard and Gadwell Ponds, and I was actually out with Dean Hester, a friend of mine, and we were herping. We were looking for Blanding's turtles, and we ran into this yellow warbler. But we'd gone out because there's a big female out there, and we were checking up on her, and we didn't see her. So I'm like, I know another place where we can go. Excuse me? Oh, sorry. And so I was like, well, I know another spot where we can go look for Blanding's turtle. So that was the new Swan Lake parking lot, the little pond up there north of there. And that was about an hour later, and boom, Dean spots Johnson County's first chaseable black-bellied whistling duck. So I know a lot of people went out for that, but that was just one of those treats that has come along with birding. So here's my yellow warbler shot at Cedar Lake, 9/15/21. For some reason, Cedar Lake, at least in the last few years, has had a lot of really late yellow warblers. I think I had like a second or third latest one there once. But like I said, it's probably not going to be going on anymore. So same day, palm warbler. at Round Pond. I just saw Jim Kettle Camp had one a few days ago. So yeah, Round Pond could be a good place to get the species early. But here's a shot that I got at Greencastle on September 8th. So number 8, same thing, just going home. Oh, you know, it's 4:27. I got to check Cedar Lake before I get home, right? So I picked up my northern water thrush. Not the best shot, but here's the shot that I got when I went out for that king rail on the 2nd of May. And you can see how different the throat is. It's really streaked, and just how much more dense those streaks are on the belly. And then of course the lighter parts have kind of a yellowish overcast often. But that was literally the spot the king rail was standing in, and the water had gone down, and it probably followed that water line, and I couldn't find it because it was seen the next day, so I missed it. But I ended up screaming back and getting a California gull. That was the day that Jim Ford found the California gull. Okay, so that was a really good day. So 428, we're getting towards the end of April here. Had a just fabulous day out at MNRA. Had a fabulous day out there the other day too, as I told some of you. But so I've been doing some volunteer surveys for Tamara over the last couple of years. She kind of wants to get a feel of how migrants use MNRA. And I'll just really quickly go into, I really like Tamara, and she's sort of like she's a biologist and conservationist type person, and she's doing a lot of the restoration there. And I really like her approach, because there are areas where there are species of trees that aren't supposed to be there, where like at Hawkeye, they just mow them right down. She wants to know what birds are actually utilizing them. So she's not going to cut down any of the white pine stands, because she told me that white pine aren't native to this particular part of Iowa. So it wouldn't be a native species they'd want to keep. But since she knows that yellow-throated warblers nest there, she's going to keep them. So that's good. So I had an excellent day. I saw 11 species, which is, you know, pretty good for 428. I had blue-wing warbler. Here's one at Hickory Hill Park. Once again, I've covered it up there. 9 to 5:20. I'll say a quick thing about this particular tree that fell over on the derecho at the Magic Corner, but it proved to be just the most amazing tree that fall. Let's see here. Went backwards. Oh, Nashville warbler. That was the Nashville warbler that I saw. Common yellow throat. Here's a yellow throat from Wanatee Park in July. I went there that day to see a northern bobwhite, which was pretty cool. Oh, geez, I should have put that picture up, but I didn't. Sorry. That was one of my best photos of a northern bobwhite. Bowling warbler, same tree. These birds would, you know, come in, filter in the early morning. And black and white warbler, you know, same kind of general spot. These birds would just come in. So it was kind of just a neat thing. And it all wasn't on the same day, of course, but it was all around that tree. And I'd bird out there with James Huntington sometimes, and we were just like, I hope they don't remove this tree. But of course they did, but that's okay. And then orange crown warbler. And here's a shot I got in September, late September last year. Just a really good sort of pulse of migration for the species, and was able to get probably my best shot I've ever got, with some goldenrod in the background. So on the 29th, I believe that was like the next day, I was at Squire Point. I got ovenbird. This was an ovenbird that I saw the year before, along the very same trail. Maybe it was the same bird, I don't know. But if you notice the bird's wings drooping, that's generally not a good thing, to see wing droop like that. If you see that in like gulls, they're dying. So I don't know if this bird was sick, dying, or it was actually really, really cold that day. So it might have just been really like trying to stay warm. It warmed up later that day, so I hope it did okay. But Also had black-throated green that on that hike. Um, got a good shot of one later in September. Keep coming back to the Cedar Lake spot, right? Just so sad it's not there anymore. 17, Kentucky warbler. Generally, it's one you can get in Johnson, but I think you kind of need a little luck. It might be just like a day when they pass through, or you know, um, a small window. They've bred before, so it's possible that you could get one if it was breeding. I think someone found a nest out um, at Hanging Rock one year, maybe Mark Madsen or something like that, or Jamie McCoy. But it's an important one. If you can get down to Southeast Iowa, um, your chances are pretty much 100% you'll at least hear one. They can be really hard to photograph down there once it's leaved out, though. So getting down there earlier is probably better, like really early May maybe. And because of the cold this year, Diana Pesic was telling me that because she just went down to Croton area, and she said that it's possible that the budding could be a little delayed. So it might be nice to get down there and really late April, early May, and hit a nice day of warbler migration, and have a lot of good opportunities to see or photograph warblers. But this was at Hanging Rock. I was taking a walk with Jesse Ellis, doing a little birding. We ran into, I think, Eliza Willis. There were still juncos around. There was still a junco there, so that's pretty late for junco. And so last day of April, I went down to the Croton unit, and I was just curious if I could see a prairie warbler, and I went, and there were two males counter singing, kind of a thing that's been going on the last couple of years. You go down there and you hear these counter singing males, usually about two, and it's really just unique habitat. I really like it. It's something that if you can get down there, it's really it's kind of a hike. There's ticks, so you just maybe have to prepare for that. But this photo I actually got on May 24th. But that was definitely the best looks and photos I've ever got of prairie warbler. There's been some really amazing moments. I went down with Mark Brown one year, and we had one just right in front of us, and oddly enough, it was singing a field sparrow song. So it was literally like we were like looking at it, and it's doing like a field sparrow. So I think there could be a really interesting study in this area. If anybody's looking to do like project or something, or knows anyone. But anyway, so I got that at the Croton unit. I got this right outside of Argyle, that first T intersection on Bell, past the Argyle junkyard. It's been a traditional spot for blue grosbeaks, but this one was just glinting in the sun. I'd never really seen one glint like that. It made me really appreciate it. So we're into May. This was at Hickory Hill Park. The photo was in August, late August. But so I guess maybe I can elaborate a little bit on that. Late August, the last couple of years have been pretty good. I think it was 2 years ago where there was like 20 species on one of the latter days in August. So I don't know really what that means. If they're starting to migrate back a little earlier, sort of the diversity of them. I have no idea if it has anything to do with climate change or anything like that. But it's going to be interesting to keep like going out and birding in late August and seeing if we can make any kind of trend. But anyway, I got this at this canoe launch area. And it was a little early, it got flagged, but like the next day, it was taken off being flagged. But anyways, this Mines of Spain area, this canoe launch, it's a hot spot on eBird, but it's it's really wooded, and there's of course a canoe launch, a nice stream, and then there's like steps you can go up into like some of the sort of cliffy type areas, and you can kind of get to at eye level with warblers. But the main reason I went, and it wasn't for Tennessee, which I got. There was a 9/15/21 shot of a Tennessee from Cedar Lake again. Tree's gone. Um, Cerulean warbler. So you can get cerulean warbler in Southeast Iowa and in our area. But I really wanted to check the spot out because I'm pretty sure they breed at this spot. And I pull up in my car, and the first 3 or 4 birds I see were cerulean warblers, and I'm just okay. These Dubuque people know what they're talking about. They're here. So that was fun to get that one. Like I said, it's bold. It's not one you might get if you just kind of stay local. Um, and then so hooded warbler 5'3". This was at Hickory Hill Park. There was a reported one, and sort of the masses kind of converged on this bird, and it started raining, and then it took off after about 2 or 3 minutes. So no one really saw it that well at that time. But later on that visit, this 524 visit, and I'll show you the main reason I was going down there. But I did pick up this at Lacey Keosauqua on that west side, long like east-west trail. So blackpoll warbler, picked it up on the 3rd. This was at Cedar Lake. Fortunately, I didn't have a nice breeding shot of one. But this we'll do maybe a little bit of ID with this one. This is a nice shot of a fall one, and like I said, they do migrate through back in low numbers in Iowa, but it's always it can be an identification challenge. So the biggest thing is the legs, really. They're sort of like that, I don't know, reddish orangish color. A bay breast is going to have more black legs. Some people talk about little streaks kind of on the sides of like the breasts. You can kind of see that on this bird. But yeah, leg color is a big part of IDing these in the fall. So that was at Squire Point. And so on the 6th, I decided to go to Greed Island, just kind of off a whim. It's probably in the week when everyone else is working, but including my wife and kids are at daycare and stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna go over there. And I've never been to Green Island, kind of at the height of migration or around there. And I went to Green Island. It was awesome. And then on the way back, it was kind of getting a little warm. But I'm like, I wonder if Maquoketa Caves down in those, those gullies and the caves where it's cool. It's kind of like a recreation of Jim Durbin's yard. So I thought that, and I'm like, I bet I can see some warblers. So I went down there, and sure enough, there were warblers flickering all over the place bathing, and I got this magnolia warbler bathing. So that was my number 24 magnolia warbler at Maquoketa Cave. So maybe you've birded Green Island and you're coming back, and like, oh, it's hot and it's noon, but go try Maquoketa Caves out if you have time, because yeah, they'll be down there bathing in the midday. And I got a Blackburnian warbler. Let's see, that was on the 11th, so we're getting sort of to mid-May. At Hawkeye, there's one from Cedar Lake last year. And I think that tree is actually still there. Some of the trees by the sort of that east side parking lot they kept. So yeah, that was, maybe we'll have some in that one. But chestnut-sided warbler. So on the 11th, I called up, or I messaged some people, and I was seeing if anybody wanted to kind of like do a little mini big day, right? And I picked the best day because Andrew went out early. Dean and I met him at Hanging Rock. It was really early. And I guess not really early. I would say it's maybe like 7 a.m. That's not early, I guess, sorry. But Andrew was there maybe an hour earlier than us. But anyway, we started at Hanging Rock and worked our way clockwise around the whole thing, and ended up at like Round Pond. but by then we were in the 120s, which is it's a pretty good day there. And Andrews stayed and picked up a few more, and then hit 130 for collective. I don't want to say claim I saw 130 in one day, but collectively between all of us. But it was a fantastic day. And I picked up chestnut sided. Um, so here's a fall chestnut sided. It's I would call it like a female, or Hatchie or what or whatever. Mark Bowman would be much better at sexing and aging this warbler. But just kind of a neat head turn there, and just that beautiful just lime green above. It's so appeasing to the eyes. But picked up Wilson's warbler for 27. When I first saw this warbler, I kind of did a double take on it, because I was like, oh, is that maybe a hooded warbler? But if you look at the tail, the sides of the tail, they're not white, they're dark. That's kind of a good first spot to go to, because hooded warblers kind of have white under and on the sides of the tail. So that was my Wilson's, and that was a shot from Cedar Lake that I got in September. But that was at Hawkeye headquarters. Got bay breasted. Here's a fall one from Cedar Lake. It's a good thing that I've been going over to that place over the years in the fall, because it's usually so good. But yeah, here's a fall bay breasted. You can see the darker legs compared to the black poll I showed you earlier. The reddish flanks. Don't really see any streaks in this chest or anything. That was at Hickory Hill. Like I said, this photo's from Cedar Lake in September. I put a breeding plumage one in there, and that was from Cedar Lake too. 5/23/20. So number 29. I'm sort of getting to the end, right? Because that's 35. But Canada Warbler. Picked that up at Hickory Hill Park on the 16th. It's always so tough to get a photo of Canada Warbler. I don't know what it is. This is like literally the only decent shot I've ever got. So it'd be nice to maybe get a totally unhindered one. But got that. So on the 17th, I went out to the Chain of Lakes Wikiup Hill Learning Center area, and I was kind of hiking the west side of Chain of Lakes, and I found this trail that I'd never seen before, and it was going right through all these oxbow lakes. So I'm like, this is kind of cool. So I started on, and then pretty soon I saw several prothonotary warblers just flying all over the place. I saw one go into a cavity. It was really cool. So that's kind of a spot that I've never thought to check, but it's perfect habitat. So I got that shot, and then I got that shot that day. Later at 5:19. Yeah, at Green Island. So that was probably the most photogenic one I've ever had. But Green Island is a great place to get shots of prothonotary warblers. In fact, I think it's one of the best places, and there's been some really late reports of the species there. And so we come to Connecticut Warbler. This crossroads. There's done a lot of work so far, right, to get to this point. If you don't see a Connecticut Warbler, then your goal is kind of done. But like I said, I got really lucky, and I got a text, and then I was hiking. So it was another big tree that had fallen down from the previous year from the derecho that was still out there. And this bird, Elizabeth, was walking up from like the Burlington entrance. You go over the bridge, then take a left, then go up the hill. She was walking up that hill and saw a bird run across a green bird run across the path. And she almost immediately recognized it as a Connecticut warbler, and then got the word out. But it was going into this tree. And so James and I, we got to the tree and we split. And like I say, luck, I went the right way. He didn't go the right way. I went the way where the bird popped up and sat there for maybe 10 seconds and allowed me to get a couple photos. And then when he came over, it was just nowhere to be seen again. But it was there. And then on my way out, got a morning warbler in the North Canyon, really dark. I had to lighten that photo up a little bit. So that's why it looks weird. But yeah, also not the easiest warbler to get a photo of. And so on the 24th, I've showed some pictures of the hooded warbler. That was after I'd seen this bird and gone way west, but this was the primary target. Um, this was at the Croton unit. Hiked up a ravine, saw this bird, got some photos and some audio. So that's another just huge check mark. Generally, you're going to have to go down there, and even going down there and trying to find one's not the easiest thing, right? So there can be reliable ones, but even reliable ones can be hit or miss. So this was another big check mark. And then, of course, I went and got the prairie, and then I went and got the hooded. So it was just an awesome day. I don't know if some of you guys remember me posting that I saw maybe like a Florida population red-shouldered hawk, which would be really weird, right? And of course, it got shot down. And I didn't really realize how much variation is within our subspecies. It can be super, super light, like the Florida ones, all the way to like what we see. But I was driving west, and I saw this just super, super light red-shouldered hawk, and I just gasped and turned around, and I wasn't able to get a photo. But actually, Clayton Will was down there a few days later or something, and he got a photo of it. It was at the same spot. So it was a good learning experience. And then on the way back, Eddyville Sand Prairie, a great place for herping. I went over there to do a little bit of herping. Didn't see anything, but maybe a race runner. And then Bell's vireos are pretty abundant in that area. So got a great shot of a Bell's. Later, went to Memorial Park. You're down there, might as well go try for the Mississippi kites, right? And so I had this sub-adult that was there. So yeah, a lot of these birds kind of played into that 300, because a lot of these birds I only maybe saw one time, like the Mississippi kite. That was the only one I saw. So, had I not seen that, I would not have gotten 300. So we're getting close to the end here. 34, black-throated blue warbler. James Huntington finds one, and I believe this and a female were seen for days throughout like the Magic Corner down into the South Canyon. And it was a magnificent year for black-throated blue last year. We had tons of sightings. And their range kind of just nips into like that Dubuque area, that part of Iowa that juts out. It's kind of like the western part of their range. Probably migratory. But I'll show you. This was one that I found at Lake McBride North Arm. That was the first one I've ever personally found, a female. And then this one was a record late one that showed up in so heck, if I wouldn't have seen it, I would have seen it here. So that's just the serendipity of birding. That's the crazy things that can happen. But this bird continued on for a few more days, and then it got really cold. So I doubt it survived, or maybe somehow got out of here. I don't know. But that was pretty neat to see that. And then here's I just wanted to include that quick because it was a fabulous year. Like, look, you can see over like Dubuque, those guys get Connecticut, or excuse me, I wish they did, black-throated blue in the fall. It's pretty easy to pick up. Something like it's almost expected to see one, but not necessarily over here. And then, I mean, you can see the map's biased because we have all these points in our corridor, and then there's Mason City, sort of, I guess, a little west of there. Ames, a lot of college birders up there. Looks like the Polk people finally maybe missed something finally. But then you got some in Omaha. So it was a great year. And this is another trend that I'm interested in, if this will keep kind of going. because it seemed like there was kind of a hint of it the year before. Mark Brown had those two, that pair out at South Arm, and that was really fun. And lo and behold, the one that I was looking for very hard at this point, I finally got it on September 6th, the Cape May Warbler. And this, I don't know, kind of, it's really sad to me. I know I've probably beaten a dead horse now, but this whole area is gone, and you saw how many photos I had, and it's all kind of around that early mid September. So I don't know what these warblers are going to do. That all this stuff is gone, and I know I don't know for a fact, but I suspect a lot of these warblers come back to the exact same little place. One thing about this spot is that there's these midge eruptions or whatever or whatever you call them. These non-stinging midges or whatever, biting midges, and you know I know the warblers are taking a lot of advantage of that. So if that keeps going on, maybe they'll still be around and be able to benefit off some of that. Um, but anyway, that's at Cedar Lake. So long live Cedar Lake. So on to some of this bonus material. So I've been to Southeast Arizona a couple times. One was kind of just for like a day where I did some birding with Mark Brown. He happened to be down there at the same time. And then we went on a trip late July, early August last year. So I built up a little bit of photo portfolio of some of the western or the sort of more southwest specialty warblers. But I'll start off with the best one, I'd say. It's not the most rare one, of course. You have like crescent chested and fan-tailed and some of these other like mega rare warblers. Rufous capped is still a very notable warbler to see in Arizona. There's a pair that's actually nesting. I think it's a little bit further west of that red dot you see. But this is an old map. There'd be a lot more red dots in Arizona by now for Rufous cap. But the one that I saw with Mark was at Florida Canyon, and the funny thing is like these warblers had been there, several seasons at least, years, and some had been seen, right as you get out of your car, right? Some years. Well, we had to hike all the way up to the top of the canyon, and at the top of the canyon, I don't know if it was mesquite or what it was, but we had to like hike through this thorn like area, and my whole torso got just ripped up. But anyway, it's small but large-headed and stout build. Really oddly slender tail, which you'll see in the photo. That they can hold up, almost like kind of wren-like. But the bright yellow throat and breast, dark eye line, and rufous crown are distinct. And habitat, brushy habitat with oaks and foothill canyons. So Florida is a perfect area to see them. In their water, and there's a stream right there. But anyway, here's that. That's the best photo I could get, and I was pretty happy with that photo. I'd love to go back. The pair now, like if you go, you obviously got to be respectful, but they're building a nest right now. And those Stoll brothers that are doing their lower 48 big year, I've been following really close because they're on Facebook and everything, and it's so much fun to follow them. In fact, they were just in Arizona getting a tufted flycatcher, and when the report of the kelp gull came up, they literally like left and drove 16 hours, and I have not heard if they found it or not. So maybe something to check up on a little later. But Rufous cat warbler. It's a gorgeous warbler, and fun to find. Sometimes hard to find. So red-faced warbler, you can see, a lot of people see them in Southeast Arizona, but their range is, throughout Mexico and then the summer up into New Mexico and Arizona. Of course, unmistakable, long, tail often raised and flip up sideways. I don't think we really saw that when we were there. But gray back, white rumps, black crown and cheek, and then the red face and the short, thick bill. Habitat, um, uncommon, but in shaded canyons along streams with montane, pine, oak, and fir forests. That's definitely where we encountered one. It was with a flock of had like a Grace's warbler and a hermit warbler, and there were some other birds, maybe like chickadees or something in it, but they were all up in a pine on the edge of a canyon. So it was like straight drop off after that. And apparently in maples that grow along canyons. So I was really happy I got this shot. Very serendipitous. We had hiked by this spot, and Mark, who's got some experience down here, said, I think it was like maybe a Grace's warbler or something he heard. And then they sounded far off, and I think we hiked up, then the hike back, it was still singing. I'm like, wait a second, it's still singing. Let's go look for this warbler. So we ended up tromping through there, and we find this awesome flock and a red face. And of course, I think Tony and maybe Dean and I had never seen one, so we were drooling. And yeah, just absolutely beautiful warbler. Painted redstart, pretty darn common down there. And if you'll see all these red dots, painted redstarts are a very vagrant species, and it's usually in the fall, right? A lot of these spots of dots would be like, October, maybe November even. Minnesota has had at least two, and they had one maybe like 2 years ago. So it's theoretically a bird Iowa could get. I think any state could get it. It's just like, it's that luck thing, and if it even sticks around for other people to see it. But unmistakable, widely throughout Arizona and New Mexico, and even up into the Big Bend area. But think American redstart and how they act. They're very similar. They're a redstart. They fan and flip their tail, and they have the white tail patches. So they're largely a black and white warbler, but with the really bright red belly. And that's not seen on juveniles. And it was cool. We got to see quite a few juveniles. In fact, we saw this last trip, we saw way more juveniles than we did adults. And the adults were always very hard to get near, and I don't think any of us got shots of any adults. But we had a juvenile that posed really nicely. You'll see here in a second. But the habitat preference, oak and pine oak woods along mountain canyons. Madera Canyon's a great place to see them. The first time I ever saw them was with Mark in February of 2017. And they were, I think, all adults at that point. So don't quote me on that, but the only ones we saw were adults. But they were really easy to approach then. So here's a juvenile, like a new or hatched one from that spring or whatever. And you can see that little hint of red on its breast starting to molten on the breast. But here's sort of here's an adult. That's the one at Madera. It was coming into a water feature at first, so that was really cool. But it was it was the one that's up from the main the Santa Rita Lodge feeders. Yeah, so that was really cool. This is kind of in the shade, best I could do there, but showing off that really beautiful breast. I don't know what I would do if I saw one of these in Iowa. Like, I would just fall backwards probably. Black-throated blue or gray. Black-throated gray warbler. It's a very common warbler in Arizona and throughout the West. But I'm surprised there's not more vagrant, and that's maybe there's a trend in that, because if this is an older map, I think they are maybe starting to become more vagrant. There was one in Madison at this park in 2020, and it like stayed there for weeks, and everyone that go out to see it would see it. So really obliging bird. But one that has been found in the Eastern Iowa corridor. I think if maybe the only record was found in Cedar County, and I think James was with some people. I know it was like one of Chuck Fuller's properties up there or something. Not Chuck, Jim, but they were up there, and someone said something about a chickadee, and then James goes, "You want to take another look at this chickadee?" Because he immediately recognizes a black-throated gray. But they're plain black, gray, white color. Not really super colorful warbler, um, but dark cheek and the white eyebrow, and plain gray plain gray back. Excuse me, sorry. And the throat is reminiscent of like chickadees or bridal titmouse, um, um, but dark streaks on the flanks and white adder tail feathers. Common in dry oak juniper woodlands, and during migration found in riparian deciduous trees. But this was from Sweetwater wetlands in February. That one was there. They have that little yellow laurel spot. So yellow laurels. Lucy's warbler. This is one I could not get a photo of when we were down there. So I asked Mark, and he provided some photos, some great photos. So thank you, Mark. But mainly a desert Southwest, arid Southwest bird. So one of the smallest warblers we have, really pointed sharp bill, just overall pale gray, cream color kind of up on the top of the breast, near the throat. Rusty rump's unique. Mark gave me some great shots to sort of showcase these things. But can be confused with a gnatcatcher. And I thought when I read that, I was interested because when we went to this thrasher spot at the beginning of the trip, I'm pretty sure I probably saw one, but thought it would like just pass it off as a gnatcatcher. And then Tony Moline saw one, and I was like, oh, so that's good information. Every gnatcatcher. So habitat, uncommon and local and riparian habitat. Dense mesquite, I guess cottonwoods and wells along streams. But this actively foraging in twigs and leaves, that's why I couldn't get the photo, because this thing was just like weaving in and out just like a mouse, and the light was fading, and I just wasn't able to do it. But here's some great shots by Mark. You can see that little red crown area. It's kind of neat. You can see that cream in the throat, and then that red rump. But tiny pointy bill, tiny little warbler. Virginia's, so we're almost done here, but Virginia's warbler, mountain west, but migrates through the Southwest, back as a neotropical migrant. So this one's very similar to our Nashville, but it doesn't have like the green in the wings. So habitat, growth. I apologize. I'm kind of just reading this. I didn't really know how to like present this part. All I know is some people wanted to see the photos. So I thought I'd just kind of just present it this way. But when it's migrating, apparently it's found in wooded or brushy habitat. So it's interesting how some of these warblers kind of change up their habitat and migration as opposed to where they actually breed. Here's a Virginia's. So yeah, just really plain gray. It's got that yellow undertail, little yellow on the breast, and then that one, he kind of caught some of that red in the crown again. That's really neat. But Grace's warbler, like our yellow-throated, but sort of just a Southwest warbler, just very similar habitat to yellow-throated, tall pines. You see here you see yellow-throated warblers and like tall pines, like white pines, and sycamores. They love sycamore trees. But so I guess Grace's warbler is similar, but they sort of glean through needles and things like that. But they're slender, short bill, round head, long tail, and the bright yellow throat, like the yellow-throated, but they have a broad eyebrow that you'll see in the photo, and entirely gray sides and neck. So this one was with that flock with the red-faced warbler and the hermit. I'd love to see one of those, or another one of these. I can't remember. I think it's this warbler. There was actually several years ago, someone found one in southeastern or south of Omaha, and it kind of I was interested in its vagrancy pattern, so I looked it up, and there's this weird line, straight line going east-west at that latitude, and it skips over Iowa, and then there's some further east. So quite frankly, I think, according to that vagrancy pattern, we could get a Grace's warbler, but very unlikely. Hermit warbler, this is just a migrant passer through in the spring and fall, and they breed up, northern Pacific Northwest. Maybe it looks like a little population in Southern California, but hermit warblers are highly vagrant. We could easily get one in Iowa. It's just not overlooking things like black-throated green warbler. We don't get Townsend's. That's the other one you kind of have to rule out. But a lot of them will stray up in like Newfoundland, all the way up there. Maine, there's just crazy streak that was the other few years ago. But yeah, the yellow that's just restricted to the face. A plain, lacks any eye lines or anything like that. And then I said, you got to separate them from Townsend's and black-throated green. But just a weak face pattern, unstreaked flanks. So they like relatively dense and shady forests, tall pines and firs. We saw some, what was it, when we first saw them, we had one with an olive warbler. And I can't remember, it's the Mount Lemon is where we had it. And there, we kind of honed in on some pygmy nuthatches. And we were looking through these pygmy nuthatches, and all of a sudden, just these warblers kind of start materializing. But yeah. So anyway, there's the best hermit I could get. Had something in its mouth. But olive warbler, last one, I promise, and then we can go to questions. Not just southeast, but a good portion of the southeastern quadrant of Arizona and southwest Mexico, New Mexico. But it's in its own family now. It's like a wood warbler, but more slender bill, flare-notched tail, dark mask, and unique call. But they like pines, and we saw this one gleaning for insects. And yeah, that's the best shot I could get. I think Dean got a pretty good one. But yeah, that was my life for olive warbler. And we ended up seeing one more on the trip, but not very well, because they like to be really high. So the end.
Okay, do people have
Stop
questions?
sharing. Is everybody still here?
Yeah. Do people have questions for Brandon? Those are amazing photos. They're just absolutely amazing. And
Thank you very much.
the amount of effort you put into getting them all is absolutely amazing. The whole story of how you've gotten them is just dramatic.
Yeah, I encourage others to try it. I'm certainly not going to try it again for a while, probably. But you know me, I say things and 10 minutes later, doing them. So. Well, I do appreciate you guys all being here tonight.
Do people have questions or comments? You can unmute yourself and talk away.
I was just going to say that a good place to see both Kentucky warblers and the cerulean warblers is Britain Timbers, and it's not quite as far to go there as it is to go all the way down to Shimmick.
Is that in like Washington or what county is
Yeah,
that?
it's south of Washington.
Okay. I've never been there, but I hear a lot of great things about that place.
It is a beautiful woods and great habitat.
Is
And
it
like
cut
I
by
said-
any streams or anything like that? Is that what?
Yeah, it's right on the Skunk River.
Oh,
And then
okay.
there are streams that flow into the Skunk River. But a lot of different terrain, a lot of bottomland as well as, higher bluff areas.
Cool. Well, thanks for mentioning that. Because yeah, people see like hooded warblers there too, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. I didn't expect there to be too many questions. Kind of a memoir, but yeah. But I do have to get going. I got to put the kids to bed.
Brandon, thank you so much. It really
Yeah.
was just fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And I like I said, I appreciate you guys all being here tonight.